The Valoran Empire had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their ships crossed the darkness between worlds like silver arrows, carrying the will of emperors who had watched entire civilizations rise and fall. They had conquered 900 star systems. They had crushed rebellions that lasted centuries. They had never known defeat, and they had forgotten what it meant to fear. Admiral Cathrell stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue and green world called Earth spin slowly in the void. He found it almost beautiful, in a primitive sort of way. The humans who lived there had only discovered faster than light travel 200 years ago. In Valoran terms, they were children who had just learned to walk. "The Council has approved the claim," his aide reported. "The 3 human colonies in the Arcturus systems fall within our ancient borders. They are to be removed." Cathrell nodded. He felt nothing about the order. The humans had built their little settlements on worlds that belonged to the Empire long before their ancestors had climbed down from trees. They would be given a chance to leave. If they refused, they would be eliminated. It was simple. It was clean. It was how the Empire had always operated. The humans refused. 3 days later, Valoran fleet reduced the colonies to ash. 17 million humans died in 6 hours. The ships that tried to flee were hunted down and destroyed. The distress signals that reached Earth carried the screams of the dying. And then, only silence, Admiral Cathrell reported the successful operation to the Imperial Council and thought nothing more of it. The humans would learn their place now. They would send diplomats to beg for mercy. They would offer tribute and promises of loyalty. Every species did in the end. On Earth, the news arrived like a hammer blow to the heart of humanity. The images from Arcturus showed burning cities and fields of the dead. Families watched recordings of their loved ones pleading for help that never came. The planet fell silent with grief, and then that silence turned into something else entirely. Admiral Sam Carter had served in the Terran Defense Force for 30 years. He had gray hair now and lines on his face that spoke of difficult decisions. He had hoped to retire soon, to spend his remaining years fishing on the lakes of his childhood. Instead, he found himself standing before the United Terran Council. Looking at the faces of leaders who had just watched their people die, "The Valoran Empire expects a certain response," Sam said. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking slightly. "They expect us to submit. They expect us to send diplomats with gifts and apologies. They expect us to accept our place beneath them." Councilwoman Katie Morrison leaned forward. She was young for her position, barely 40, but her eyes held a cold fire that made older politicians nervous. "And what do you recommend, Admiral?" "I recommend we declare war. Total war. The kind that humanity has spent centuries trying to forget." The chamber erupted in voices. Some called for caution. Some demanded immediate action. Some simply stared in disbelief. War against the Valoran Empire? It was madness. It was suicide. Their fleet numbered in the tens of thousands. Humanity had perhaps 300 combat-ready vessels. Katie raised her hand, and the room fell quiet. "Admiral Carter, explain what you mean by total war." Sam took a deep breath. "The Valorans fight wars the way their ancestors did 12,000 years ago. They follow rules. They protect civilians. They meet in designated battle zones and fight until one side admits defeat. They have never faced an enemy who refuses to follow those rules." He activated a holographic display showing human history. Images of ancient battles flickered past, followed by the trenches of the First World War, the bombed cities of the Second, the nuclear standoffs of the Cold War era. Humanity has spent its entire existence fighting itself. We have developed every form of warfare imaginable. We have learned to strike from shadows, to break the will of our enemies, to destroy not just armies but the systems that support them. We did terrible things to each other, and we promised ourselves we would never do them again. Sam paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. "The Valorans have given us no choice. They murdered 17 million of our people without warning or mercy. If we submit now, we become slaves. If we fight their way, we lose. Our only option is to fight our way." The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. The United Terran Council authorized a formal declaration of war against the Valoran Empire. The message was transmitted across all channels, in every language, reaching every corner of human space and beyond. On the Valoran homeworld, Emperor Zethkin received the declaration with a smile. He sat upon a throne carved from the bones of conquered kings, surrounded by advisors who had guided the empire for generations. The human message was translated and read aloud, and the entire court laughed. They declare war. One advisor chuckled. With what? Their little fleet of primitive ships. They are emotional creatures, another observed. They will rage for a time, and then they will realize the hopelessness of their position. We should be patient with them. Emperor Zethkin raised a clawed hand for silence. Send Admiral Cathrell to remind them of their place. Destroy a few more of their colonies. They will learn. The emperor dismissed the matter from his mind. He had ruled for 300 years, and had seen a dozen species attempt to resist the empire. All of them had failed. All of them had eventually knelt before his throne. The humans would be no different. He could not have been more wrong across Earth in every human colony. Something was happening that the Valorans could not understand. Factories that had been producing civilian goods began retooling for war production. Young men and women lined up at recruitment centers, not because they were forced, but because they wanted to fight. Scientists who had dedicated their lives to peaceful research began working on weapons. Artists created propaganda. Musicians wrote songs of defiance. Humanity was not just preparing for war. Humanity was transforming into something it had not been for centuries. The peaceful civilization that had spread among the stars was remembering its violent past. And that past was waking up hungry. Admiral Sam Carter stood at the window of his office, watching troop transports lift off into the night sky. Katie Morrison stood beside him, her reflection ghostly in the glass. "Do you think we can win?" she asked quietly. Sam considered the question carefully. "I think the Valorans have made a mistake that every bully eventually makes. They assumed that because we chose peace, we were incapable of war. They are about to learn the difference." In the darkness between stars, human ships were already moving. They did not travel toward the Valoran fleet. They slipped around it, behind it, into the spaces where no enemy had ever dared to go. The first phase of Operation Blackout was beginning. The Valoran Empire had no idea what was coming. The war had begun, and humanity intended to win it, no matter what it cost. No matter what lines they had to cross, they would make the Empire regret the day it ever looked toward Earth. And somewhere in the void, Admiral Cathrell received reports that made no sense. Human ships appearing where they should not be, transmissions that carried not pleas for mercy, but promises of vengeance. For the first time in his long career, he felt something cold settle in his stomach. It might have been fear. The Valoran Empire had fought wars for 12,000 years. And in all that time, they had developed a certain way of doing things. Their fleets would gather in great formations, moving like schools of silver fish through the void. They would meet their enemies in designated zones, exchange fire according to ancient protocols, and accept surrender when the outcome was clear. Civilians were never targeted. Supply lines were considered neutral territory. War was a dance with steps that everyone knew. Humanity did not know the dance. Humanity did not care to learn. General Derek Hayes had spent 20 years studying human military history. He knew about the guerrilla fighters of ancient forests, the resistance movements of occupied nations, the special forces who struck from shadows and vanished before their enemies could respond. He knew that humanity had perfected the art of fighting dirty. And now he was going to teach that art to the Valoran Empire. The briefing room aboard the command ship Resilience was crowded with officers who had volunteered for what everyone called the suicide missions. They were men and women who had lost family in the colony attacks, or who simply refused to let their species be conquered without a fight. "The Valorans expect us to meet their fleet," Derek said, pointing at the holographic map that floated before them. "They have 50 ships for every one of ours. In a straight battle, we lose. So we are not going to give them a straight battle." Commander Lisa Bennett stepped forward. She was small and quiet, the kind of person you might overlook in a crowd, which made her perfect for what was coming. "Their empire is vast, but their supply lines are fragile. They have never needed to defend their cargo convoys because no one has ever attacked them. Their fuel depots are unguarded. Their communication relays have minimal protection. She highlighted dozens of points on the map scattered throughout Valoran space. We are going to hit every single one of these targets. Not their warships. Not their military bases. We are going to starve their war machine. The first strikes came 2 weeks later. Small human vessels, equipped with stealth technology that the Valorans had never bothered to develop, slipped through the gaps in their patrol networks. They found cargo ships carrying food to distant colonies and destroyed them. They found fuel stations that served the great warships and turned them into expanding balls of fire. They found communication relays that connected the Empire and left them as silent. Spinning debris, Admiral Cothrell received the reports with growing confusion. His ships were searching for the human fleet, preparing for the great battle that would end this foolish war. Instead of a fleet, they found nothing. Instead of battle, they found chaos. Where are they attacking from? He demanded. Everywhere, Admiral, his aide replied, and there was fear in his voice. They appear, they strike, and they vanish before our ships can respond. We have lost 47 cargo vessels this week, 3 fuel depots, 11 communication stations. Kethril stared at the tactical display, trying to understand. The humans were not fighting a war. They were fighting something else entirely, something his people had no name for. On the colony world of Valoran Prime 7, Governor Methil was preparing for his morning address when the sky filled with small objects falling like metal rain. His guards rushed him to safety, expecting bombs, expecting fire. Instead, they found millions of small papers drifting down through the atmosphere. The message on each paper was the same, translated into perfect Valoran script. Your empire murdered our children. We are coming for yours. This is your only warning. Evacuate now. Methil held one of the papers in his trembling hands. They warn us? Why would they warn us? His military advisor had no answer. The Valorans did not understand psychological warfare. They did not understand that the warning itself was the weapon, that the fear it created would spread faster than any fleet could travel. Within days, panic had gripped a dozen colony worlds. Citizens demanded evacuation. Local governors called for military protection that could not be spared. The mighty Valoran Empire, which had never known fear, was learning to be afraid. Captain Ryan Mitchell commanded one of the stealth raiders. His ship was small and fast, crewed by 30 volunteers who had trained for months in the art of hit-and-run warfare. They had struck 4 targets in the past week and had not lost a single person. New orders coming in, his communications officer reported. Command wants us to hit the supply depot at Kelith Station. Ryan studied the target information. Kelith Station was deep in Valoran territory, surrounded by patrol routes and sensor networks. It should have been impossible to reach. They think we cannot get there, Ryan said with a thin smile. Let us prove them wrong. The raid on Kelith Station became legendary among human forces. Ryan's ship slipped through the sensor network by hiding in the radiation shadow of a dying star. They approached the station during a shift change when attention was lowest. They launched their missiles and were gone before the first explosion faded. The station had held fuel for 100 warships. Now, it held nothing but fire and debris. Admiral Cothrell watched the destruction through long-range sensors. His clawed hands gripped the railing of his command deck until the metal bent. This was not war. This was something else. This was terror. Admiral, his aide said hesitantly. The crew is becoming ... unsettled. There are rumors spreading. They say the humans are ghosts. They say we cannot fight what we cannot see. The humans are not ghosts, Kethrall growled. They are animals. Savage, primitive animals who do not know how to fight with honor. But even as he spoke, he wondered if honor would be enough. His people had built their empire on strength and tradition. They had never faced an enemy who refused to meet them in open battle, who struck from shadows and vanished like smoke. On Earth, Admiral Sam Carter reviewed the reports with grim satisfaction. The supply interdiction campaign was exceeding all expectations. Valoran military movements were slowing as fuel became scarce. Communications between their systems were becoming unreliable. The great empire was starting to feel the first symptoms of starvation. "They still do not understand," Lisa Bennett observed. "They keep sending their warships to find our fleet, while we keep hitting their supply lines. It is like they cannot adapt." "They have never needed to adapt," Sam replied. "That is their weakness. They have fought the same way for 12,000 years because it always worked. They do not know how to fight any other way." Katie Morrison entered the command center, carrying a data pad with the latest intelligence reports. "Their civilian population is starting to panic. We have intercepted communications from several colony worlds demanding evacuation. Their government is trying to suppress the news, but it is spreading." Sam nodded slowly. "Good. Fear is a weapon, and we are going to use it. Prepare the next phase." The next phase was simple in concept and brutal in execution. Human ships would continue their raids, but now they would leave survivors. Those survivors would carry stories back to their homes. Stories of ships that appeared from nowhere. Stories of enemies who showed no mercy. Stories that would spread through the Empire like a disease. The Valorans had murdered 17 million humans without a second thought. Now humanity was going to make them regret that decision every single day until the war ended. In the darkness between stars, more human ships were moving. More targets were being selected. More fear was being planted in the hearts of those who had thought themselves invincible. The Empire was beginning to break. It just did not know it yet. The Valoran High Council gathered in their great chamber, beneath a ceiling painted with the victories of 10,000 years. The seats that had once held calm and confident leaders now held frightened old men who could not understand what was happening to their empire. Admiral Cathrell stood before them, delivering a report that made no sense even as he spoke it. "The humans are building ships faster than we can destroy them," he said, his voice strained. "We have confirmed kills on 112 of their vessels in the past 3 months. Yet their fleet has grown by 400 ships in the same period." The council members exchanged looks of disbelief. "Impossible," one of them said. "Ships cannot be built that quickly. The construction time alone would take years." "For us, yes," Cathrell replied. "The humans do not build ships the way we do. They do not craft them with care over decades. They produce them in weeks. Their vessels are crude, simple, designed to be built fast and replaced faster. They sacrifice beauty for function. They sacrifice longevity for numbers. On Earth and across every human colony, the factories never stopped. Robots worked alongside humans in 3 shifts that covered every hour of every day. The ships that rolled off the production lines were not elegant. They were boxes of metal with engines and weapons attached. They were ugly and functional and deadly. Captain Ryan Mitchell had been given command of one of these new carriers. His ship had been constructed in 18 days from start to finish. The paint was still drying when he took her out for the first combat patrol. "She is not pretty," Ryan told his crew as they prepared for departure. "She creaks when she turns. Half the systems are held together with temporary patches. But she has guns, she has engines, and she has us. That is all we need." His first officer, Lieutenant Megan Torres, ran through the pre-launch checklist. She was young, barely 25, but she had already survived 2 major engagements. That made her a veteran by current standards. "The Valorans build their ships to last centuries," she observed. "They treat them like works of art. And that is why we are going to win," Ryan replied. "You cannot be afraid to lose a ship that took you 100 years to build. You fight cautiously. You retreat when things look bad. We do not have that problem. We build them fast, we fly them hard, and if we lose them, we build more." The battle at Nexus Station proved him right. The Valorans had gathered 47 capital ships to defend the strategic outpost. Each ship was a masterpiece of engineering, crewed by soldiers who had trained for decades. They formed their traditional battle line and prepared to crush the approaching human fleet. What they saw confused them. The human formation was chaos. Hundreds of small attack craft swarmed ahead of the larger vessels. They did not fly in ordered patterns. They weaved and dodged and split apart and came together again. Like a living cloud of angry insects, Ryan watched from his command deck as the swarm engaged the enemy. The Valoran ships were powerful beyond measure. Their weapons could crack moons, but they were slow to turn, slow to target. Designed for the stately warfare their people had always known. The human pilots did not fight with stately movements. They fought like maniacs. They dove into the gaps between enemy ships. They came in so close that the great weapons could not track them. They died in droves, and they kept coming. Lieutenant Torres called out the losses. Fighter Wing 7 destroyed. Wing 12 at half strength. Wing 3 reporting heavy casualties, and the enemy, Ryan asked. For capital ships disabled, 2 destroyed. They are trying to reform their line, but our pilots are not letting them. On the Valoran flagship, Admiral Cathrell watched in horror as his beautiful ships were swarmed by metal insects. His weapons officers were doing everything right, following every protocol, and it did not matter. The humans were everywhere at once, too fast to track, too numerous to destroy. Admiral, we are receiving distress signals from the Eternal Glory. They have lost engine control. The humans are concentrating fire on their bridge section. Cathrell closed his eyes. The Eternal Glory was 300 years old, a veteran of countless campaigns. Her captain was his oldest friend. Order the fleet to close formation. Protect the damaged ships. But closing formation was exactly what the humans wanted. The swarm shifted, pulling back just enough to let the Valoran ships bunch together. And then the human carriers launched their second wave. Ryan gave the order himself. All batteries, fire at will. Hit them while they are grouped. The carriers were crude ships, but their weapons worked perfectly well. Missiles streaked across the void. Energy beams stabbed through the darkness. The Valoran fleet clustered together for mutual protection. Became a single massive target. By the end of the battle, 31 Valoran capital ships had been destroyed or disabled. The humans had lost over 1,000 small craft and 3 carriers. The numbers seemed to favor the Valorans, but the truth was different. The Valoran ships had taken centuries to build. The human losses would be replaced within a month. Admiral Cathrell retreated with his surviving vessels, leaving Nexus Station to fall into human hands. For the first time in his 200-year career, he had been defeated. For the first time in living memory, the Valoran Empire had lost a major battle. Emperor Zethkon received the news in silence. His advisors waited for him to speak, for him to offer wisdom, for him to tell them that everything would be fine. He said nothing for a long time. How? He finally asked. How do they have so many ships? How do they replace their losses so quickly? How do they fight with such madness? No one had an answer. The Valorans had never encountered a species like this. They had never faced an enemy that treated war as an industrial process, that built weapons the way they built consumer goods, that measured victory not in honor but in simple mathematics. On Earth, Admiral Sam Carter reviewed the battle reports. With the closest thing to satisfaction he had felt since the war began, the victory at Nexus Station was significant, but more important was what it represented. They are learning that they cannot beat us with quality, he told the assembled commanders. Their ships are better than ours. Their technology is more advanced. Their crews are more experienced. None of that matters when we can build 10 ships for every one of theirs. Katie Morrison studied the production figures on her datapad. The new factories on Mars will be online next week. We're looking at doubling our output within 2 months. Good. Because this war is just beginning. The Valorans have thousands of ships. We need to be able to match them, not through individual strength, but through sheer numbers. The human war machine was growing. Every day brought more ships, more weapons, more soldiers ready to fight. The peaceful civilization that had spread among the stars was becoming something else. Something that had not existed for centuries. It was becoming a weapon. And it was aimed directly at the heart of the Valoran Empire, far from Earth. In the shadows of Valoran space, more raids were being planned. More supply lines were being cut. More fear was spreading through an empire that had forgotten how to be afraid. The war continued. And humanity was just getting started. The The war had lasted 2 years, and the Valoran Empire was bleeding from 1,000 wounds. Ships that had once patrolled the borders in perfect formation now sat idle, their fuel tanks empty. Colony worlds that had never known hunger were rationing food. Communication networks that had connected 900 systems were fragmenting, leaving governors isolated and afraid. On the industrial world of Kelith, workers gathered outside the distribution centers demanding answers. Food shipments had stopped arriving 3 weeks ago. Human raiders had destroyed the convoy somewhere in the darkness between stars, and no replacement convoy had been sent. The planetary governor stood on his balcony, watching the crowd grow larger, and wondered if his own people would tear him apart before the humans ever arrived. Intelligence Officer Nicole Harris reviewed intercepted communications aboard the command ship Defiant. She had been doing this work for 18 months now, and she had watched the Valoran Empire slowly crumble from the inside. The messages she intercepted told the story better than any battle report. Their civilian population is losing faith, she told Admiral Sam Carter during the morning briefing. They have never experienced anything like this. Their government promised quick victory, and instead, their empire is falling apart. Sam studied the strategic map that covered the main wall of the briefing room. Red zones marked Valoran-controlled space, but that red was shrinking every month. Human forces had not conquered much territory, but they had made vast regions of the empire ungovernable. They are running out of options, he observed. Soon they will have to make a choice, negotiate or escalate. The Valorans chose escalation. Emperor Zethkin gathered his remaining military commanders in the war chamber. For 300 years, he had ruled with calm confidence. Now his hands trembled as he addressed his generals. We must end this war quickly, he declared. Every day it continues, we grow weaker. The humans grow stronger. Their factories produce more ships than we can destroy. Their raiders strike targets we cannot defend. This cannot continue. Admiral Cathrell stepped forward. He had aged visibly in the past 2 years, his scales losing their luster, his eyes carrying shadows of defeat. There is one option we have not tried, Emperor. A decisive strike against their homeworld, Earth itself. The war chamber fell silent. Attacking a species' homeworld was considered extreme even by Valoran standards. It was the kind of action that ended wars permanently, one way or another. If we destroy Earth, Cathrell continued, we destroy the heart of their civilization. Their morale will collapse. Their colonies will scatter. Without their birthplace, they will lose the will to fight. The Emperor considered this.
Are we the humans?
We're an emotional species deeply attached to their origins. Perhaps destroying Earth would break them as nothing else could. Gather every available ship, he ordered. Every vessel that can fly, every crew that can fight. We will assemble the largest fleet in our history and crush their world once and for all. Human intelligence networks detected the buildup within days. Spies on Valoran worlds reported massive ship movements. Communication intercepts revealed the target. Admiral Sam Carter convened the War Council for an emergency session. They are coming for Earth, he announced. Every ship they have left, the estimates put their fleet at 3,000 capital vessels, plus support craft. The room fell silent. 3,000 ships. The human fleet, even with its rapid production, numbered perhaps 800 combat-ready vessels. In a straight fight around Earth, they would be overwhelmed. Commander Lisa Bennett ran the numbers on her tactical display. We cannot match that fleet in direct combat. Even if we throw everything we have at them, we are looking at 5-to-1 odds, maybe worse. Captain Kyle Morgan, a veteran of a dozen engagements, spoke from the back of the room. Then we do not fight them at Earth. We fight them everywhere else. Sam nodded slowly. He had been thinking the same thing. Explain. Kyle stepped forward, his face grim. While their fleet travels to Earth, we take our own fleet to their core worlds. We position ourselves around their colonies, their cities, their civilian populations. We do not attack, not immediately. We wait. Katie Morrison understood at once. Mutually assured destruction. If they destroy Earth, we destroy everything they have left. Exactly. We make them understand that if Earth dies, the Valoran Empire dies with it. No victory, no survival, just mutual annihilation.
Alice.
The plan was approved unanimously. It was a gamble, the greatest gamble in human history. If the Valorans called their bluff, if they decided they could rebuild from the ashes, then Earth would burn and billions would die. But Sam Carter did not believe they would call the bluff. The Valorans had never faced an enemy willing to embrace total destruction. They did not have the mindset for it. Humanity did. The great Valoran armada departed for Sol System, carrying the hopes of an empire and the determination to end the war with one crushing blow. 3,000 ships stretched across the void, their engines burning bright against the darkness. At the same time, the human fleet moved in the opposite direction. 800 ships slipped past the advancing armada, using the cover of asteroid, fields and the shadows of gas giants to avoid detection. They traveled toward the heart of the Valoran Empire, toward worlds that had never seen war. Captain Ryan Mitchell commanded one of the lead squadrons. His crew was tired. His ship was battered from months of continuous operations, but they kept moving. They all understood what was at stake. Captain Lieutenant Torres reported, "We are approaching the Valoran core systems. Sensors show minimal defensive presence. They really did send everything to Earth." Ryan studied the display showing the Valoran homeworld ahead. Billions of civilians lived there, going about their daily lives, unaware that human ships were positioning themselves in the darkness above their heads. "All ships, take assigned positions," he ordered. "Weapons hot, but do not fire. We wait for the signal." Across the Valoran Empire, similar scenes played out. Human squaw. Drones appeared around colony after colony, silent and deadly. They did not attack. They simply waited, their weapons aimed at cities and factories and homes on Earth. Admiral Sam Carter recorded a message that would be transmitted the moment the Valoran fleet entered the Sol System. He sat alone in his quarters, looking at the camera, knowing that the next few hours would determine the fate of two civilizations. To the Valoran Empire, he began, his voice calm and steady. "You have come to destroy our home, we understand. We expected this. But you need to understand something as well." He paused, letting the words settle. "For every human life you take today, we will take 10,000 Valoran lives tomorrow. This is not a threat. This is a promise. Humanity has survived ice ages, plagues, and centuries of war against itself. We did not survive by showing mercy to those who sought our extinction." He leaned forward slightly. "You have 1 hour to withdraw from our system. After that, we begin destroying your worlds, your families, your children, everything you have ever loved. This war will not end with your victory. It will end with the destruction of both our species, or it will end with you leaving our space forever." He ended the recording and sent it to the communications officer. Then he sat back and waited. Somewhere out there, 3,000 enemy ships were approaching Earth. Somewhere out there, 800 human ships were waiting for his order to burn the Valoran Empire to ash. The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance, and only time would tell which one would blink first. The Valoran armada entered the Sol System like a tide of silver death. 3,000 warships spread across the void, their weapons charged, their crews ready to deliver the final blow to the species that had dared to challenge them. Admiral Kethrel stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue and green world grow larger on his display. Earth, the birthplace of humanity. Soon, it would be nothing but ash and memory. "Admiral," his sensor officer reported, "we are detecting minimal defensive formations. Your fleet is not here." Kethrel frowned. He had expected the humans to make a final stand, to throw everything they had at the approaching armada. Instead, he found only orbital defense platforms and a handful of patrol vessels. Where were their ships? Where was their fleet? The answer came moments later, transmitted from Valoran Prime itself. "Admiral, we are receiving an emergency communication from the homeworld. Human ships have been detected in our core systems. They are positioned around every major population center. They are not attacking, but their weapons are active." Kethrel felt the blood drain from his face. He had taken the entire fleet to Earth, leaving the Empire undefended. And the humans, instead of fighting here, had gone there. A new transmission arrived, broadcast on all frequencies. Admiral Sam Carter's face appeared on every screen in the Valoran fleet. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but his words carried the weight of extinction. You came to destroy our home. Fair enough. We expected that. But understand this. For every human life you take today, we will take 10,000 Valoran lives tomorrow. Not soldiers, civilians, your families, your children, everyone you have ever loved. The message paused. Every Valoran officer watched in horrified silence. This is not a threat. This is a promise. Humanity did not survive ice ages, plagues, and countless wars against itself by showing mercy to those who sought our extinction. You wanted to see what humans are capable of. Now you know. Another pause, longer this time. You have 1 hour to withdraw from the Sol system. After that, we begin. The transmission ended. Cathrell stood frozen, his mind racing. If he attacked Earth now, the humans would destroy the homeworld. They would kill billions of civilians. They would reduce the Valoran Empire to scattered colonies fighting for survival. But if he withdrew, he would be admitting defeat. He would be proving that the Valoran Empire could be intimidated by a species that had barely learned to travel among the stars. Admiral Hizade said quietly, "What are your orders?" Cathrell did not answer. He was thinking about his family back on Valoran Prime, his wife, his children, his grandchildren. They were all there, going about their lives, unaware that human weapons were aimed at their heads. On Valoran Prime, Emperor Zethkon received the same transmission. He watched Admiral Carter's face, listened to his words, and felt something he had not felt in 300 years of rule. Fear. True. Genuine, existential fear. His advisors were panicking around him, shouting suggestions and demands. Some wanted to call the bluff, convinced the humans would not actually murder billions of civilians. Others were weeping openly, begging the Emperor to order the withdrawal. "They are insane," one advisor whispered. "They would destroy themselves just to destroy us." "What kind of species does that?" Zethkin knew the answer. Humans were survivors. They came from a world that had tried to kill them with ice and heat, with disease and disaster. They had spent their entire history fighting each other, developing ever more terrible weapons, learning to embrace destruction as a tool of survival. The Valorans had conquered many species, but they had never conquered a species like this. They had never faced an enemy that was willing to die as long as the enemy died with them. "Send the order," Zethkon said quietly. "Emperor, send the order to Admiral Cathrell. The fleet will withdraw from Sol System immediately." The room fell silent. After 2 years of war, after thousands of ships lost and millions of lives ended, the Valoran Empire was surrendering. Not because they had been defeated in battle, but because they had finally understood what kind of enemy they faced. Admiral Cathrell received the order with 43 minutes remaining on the human deadline. He stared at it for a long moment, feeling his career and his pride crumbling around him. Then he gave the command. "All ships reverse course. We are withdrawing from the system." The greatest armada in Valoran history turned and fled without firing a single shot. On Earth, Admiral Sam Carter watched the Valoran ships retreat. He felt no triumph, no satisfaction. He felt only tired relief and a quiet hope that the killing might finally be over. Katie Morrison stood beside him on the command deck. "What? Do you think they will honor the peace?" "They will," Sam replied. "Because now they understand something every bully eventually learns." "What is that? Never start a fight with someone who has nothing left to lose and everything to prove?" Negotiations began within the week. The Valoran delegation arrived on Earth looking defeated and diminished. Their elaborate ceremonial robes seeming almost pathetic in the simple human conference room. The terms were harsh. The Empire would pay reparations for the destroyed colonies. They would cede 17 border systems to human control. They would sign a treaty recognizing humanity as a protected species, guaranteeing that no Valoran force would ever attack human territory again. Emperor Zethkin signed the treaty himself, his hands steady despite the humiliation. He had lived 300 years and ruled an empire of 900 worlds. He was signing away a piece of that empire to a species his people had dismissed as primitive. The signing ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy. Other species watched in amazement as the mightiest empire in known space bent. the knee to a young civilization that had barely learned to fly among the stars. Captain Ryan Mitchell watched the broadcast from his ship, surrounded by his exhausted crew. Lieutenant Torres sat beside him, her eyes fixed on the screen. "We did it," she said quietly. "Actually did it." Ryan nodded slowly. He was thinking about the friends he had lost, the battles he had fought, the moments when he had been certain they would all die. "We did. But let us hope we never have to do it again." Across human space, celebrations erupted. The war was over. Against all odds, against an enemy that had ruled for 12,000 years, humanity had won. Not through superior technology or greater numbers, but through sheer determination and a willingness to embrace the unthinkable. The Valoran Empire would recover in time. Their power would slowly rebuild, but they would never forget the lesson they had learned in those 2 terrible years. Some species were not meant to be conquered. Some species were too stubborn, too adaptable, too willing to fight to the last breath and beyond. Some species looked at extinction and said, "Not today." Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy in terms that could never be ignored. They were not the most advanced species. They were not the most numerous. But they were survivors, forged in the fire of their own violent history, and they would not go quietly into the night. Admiral Sam Carter retired 6 months after the war ended. He went back to the lakes of his childhood and spent his remaining years fishing and watching the sunrise. Sometimes he thought about the war, about the decisions he had made, about the terrible promises he had been willing to keep. He never regretted any of it. He had done what was necessary to protect his people and his world. That was all that mattered in the end. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the galaxy remembered the day humanity declared war on the Valoran Empire. They remembered how the great empire had panicked, had feared, had finally retreated. They remembered. And they were careful never to give humanity a reason to declare war again.